welcome to season 3 of Our Golden 20s. My name is Tegan. I'm joined by my cat Maud, if you hear her, and my co-host Sadie. And
hello.
Yeah, this is our very first episode of our 3rd year of recording this podcast. Haven't missed a week. We've been there every single Tuesday, and yeah, it's pretty crazy.
It is so crazy. I feel like it doesn't feel like it's been that long. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
no.
It is worth noting that we definitely we are a pandemic podcast. So it's like there's no concept of time through the pandemic. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels like a long time, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I guess that much time has gone by. I don't know.
Yeah, there are certain parts of it, like the time before having a podcast seems like really far away.
Yeah.
And yet all of the episodes, if I'm thinking about the contents of the episodes, seem really, I don't know, close to me, or like we could have recorded episodes like a month ago. But
Yeah.
thinking about
That's true.
not doing it every Tuesday, or every week rather, feels like a really long time ago. And even like I remember us talking about the podcast and kind of like brainstorming ideas, and that seems, I don't know, like a very long time ago to me.
Yeah, definitely. And even thinking of like how many different things we've talked about on the episode or on the podcast in different episodes, I'm like, okay, yeah, we have to have a lot of episodes out there because we've covered, it feels like everything, but yet here we are, a whole new season with even more things to talk about because we just can't get enough, and we're so glad you guys continue to listen in because apparently you can't get enough either.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I feel like typically when we launch a new season, it's all about getting to know us because I feel like, and you obviously know us if you listen in every week, we share our perspectives and like little life updates here and there, but we don't really talk about ourselves that much. So it's always fun just to take a break from a deep dive into a specific topic and just have a fun little girls' night, girls' morning, whenever you're listening to this. Maybe it's not even girls, maybe, maybe I'm being exclusionary in my terms here, but just a little hangout to get to know each other. So that's what we're going to do today.
Yeah, I'm excited. I don't know, where do you want to start this episode?
Wherever you think. We can maybe just start by talking about the podcast, maybe reflecting. We love a good reflection, a little good like goal setting moment. So maybe we can start there.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. So I think when we started this podcast in February of 2021, our intention was to sort of help people navigate through their 20s and through the 2020s. And when we were kind of coming up with this idea, this was, at least in Canada, very much still peak pandemic. Like we were in a lockdown when we were coming up with these ideas. It was all virtual. And so it was like, I feel like people need, I don't know, a fresh perspective, need a positive voice. And at least for me, I also felt like I need a creative outlet that's not just me, I don't know, thinking about how much it sucks to live in the 2020s and how my 20s suck. And so I think that was kind of the part where we started at and where our intentions were. And we were trying to sort of like create a community, empower people to live their best life, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I feel like the community piece was big for me because I was living alone in lockdowns, and it was just very, like, I don't know. Yes, it was a creative outlet for me, but I was actually listening back to our first episode, which is so cringy to listen to. But at the same time, I said how I was looking forward to recording so much because it was just like my weekly standing like check-in with Tegan where I knew we would chat every
Yeah.
single week, and it just like brought me so much joy to have that almost like standing appointment in my social calendar when I was just by myself at home. So it was like a huge sense of connection and community for me. And I
Hmm.
remember us saying how there's probably a lot of people in a similar boat to me through the
Yeah.
pandemic. So we were just really wanting to connect with you guys and, of course, empower you to live your best life when it felt like the world was ending or you were maybe going through an identity crisis, which I think we're going to
Yeah.
get into a little bit of, how we've personally changed over these past 2 years. And an identity crisis is maybe an understatement of what I feel like I've gone through the past 2 years.
Mm.
But I think it was just, us showing up here for ourselves, for each other, and for you guys as well, just to help everybody get through that and just kind of bond over how much life sucks sometimes, but also how great it can be all in the same breath.
Yeah, 100%. I think maybe we can start with sort of talking about how we've changed since the beginning of the podcast, because I kind of sometimes I picture someone's just discovered our podcast and they're like, well, I'll listen to the first episode and see what's up. And they listen, they're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Then they're like, oh, I see like this episode they uploaded 3 weeks ago. I really want to listen. And I'm curious if that person would hear a change in us, because
Yeah.
it like a lot of change has happened, like a lot of
Yeah.
like shit's gone down, good and bad. So I don't
Yeah.
know.
That's so funny you say that because listening back, I can hear a difference in us, but I don't know
Yeah.
if you as a listener, like listening to like season 1 and now in season 3, like if you could actually hear a difference. And I always think that too. I'm always like, it kind of is unfortunate if people go to our first ever episode and listen to us then versus now, because even just in our
Yeah.
conversation and I don't know. I feel we're just, well, we have 2 years of experience doing this now where it just feels more natural and sounds a lot
Yeah.
more natural. And I don't know, just me personally, I feel way more confident in having a podcast where before I was like, I don't know
Hmm.
what I'm doing. This is so silly. I'm so giggly. Where now I'm like, guys, listen up. These are the
Yeah.
cold hard facts. So funny.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Tag,
I
on
feel
that
that.
note, yeah, do you maybe want to talk to us about how you feel like you've changed over these past 2 years? What's been going on behind the scenes in your
Yeah.
life that maybe people don't really pick up on a week to week basis? And just, I guess, a reflection of the podcast or the last 2 years for you?
Yeah, definitely. Well, like I said, when we started this pandemic, we were still in this pandemic. Oh my God, this podcast, we were in a pandemic. And so we were
Yes.
still in a lockdown, at least in Toronto, where we have very long lockdowns. And so that was like a whole thing, even just the difference in, I don't know, the world
Yeah.
in the last
Yeah.
2 years has been kind of crazy. And yeah, like we didn't record an episode in person for like 6 months or
6 months.
something
I
crazy.
was just gonna
Yeah.
say, like, we started this podcast in like February. We started planning it in
Yeah.
January, actually launched in February. And then I don't think I saw Tegan in person until her birthday in June. And we were
June.
like, we have so much to celebrate. Like, we've launched a podcast. Our podcast hit maybe
Yeah.
10,000 listens. Tegan's birthday, it was your 25th birthday, I think. Like, all of these things we were celebrating in
Yeah.
June when it had all happened, at least the podcast stuff had all happened January, February, like 6 months before that. Like, so nuts to think back on.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so that's what feels very different from me. And so there's some things that have changed within myself. And I'm like, I don't know if this is from the podcast, if this is from
Mhm.
leaving lockdown, if this is like just what happens when you're in your 20s. Like, I don't know. I'm going through it just like all you listeners. We're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, when we started recording, I was planning my wedding, in quotes. My husband and I had eloped in my parents' backyard during the pandemic, but we still were doing our wedding like reception, I guess you'd call it. So that hadn't happened yet. I had recently moved. I used to live downtown Toronto in a little condo. I had moved to a house and renovated it. So I was still kind of figuring out that situation. I was working a different job than I'm working now. And so those are kind of like the big, obvious, visible changes. They're the changes you'd see,
Mhm.
like if you followed me on Instagram, say.
Yeah.
I think the things I wanted to highlight that maybe weren't as visible is that before I started the podcast compared to now, I did not prioritize self care at all. Like, at
Mhm.
all. If I was like ranking things that are important to me, it would not have even been on the list. And it wasn't because I didn't think self care was important. I just always was the person who was like, I don't have time for that. Maybe it was a little bit of like, I don't think I deserve that. But
Mhm.
it was just like never something, which is funny because we talk about it a lot. I feel like this
Yeah.
episode's going to get deep, by the way, just based
I
off
love
of
it.
this already.
I love it so
But
much.
I don't know. Like before the podcast, I could count all the times I had journaled on one hand. Now I think
Yeah.
I can call myself a journaler. And I
Yes.
do not think that that would have happened if we hadn't been talking about it weekly.
Mhm. Yeah. If I wasn't
Like,
showing up every week being like, "Hey Tag, what are your goals?
yeah,
Hey Tag, what are you journaling about?
yeah,
Here's some journal prompts."
exactly. Well, or it was almost like, oh, we'll do an episode about our goals. And it's like, okay, so I've got to come up with goals. Well, I might as well write them in this journal. Like my husband had got me
Yeah.
a journal that January. So then I was like, okay. But then I like it was almost like a backwards way where I was like, wait, I accidentally made myself a journaler, but I did. I
Yeah.
don't know. I
We
also
love
like would
it.
never set goals really. Like outside of if I was unemployed, I'd be like, I need a job, if that counts, but never sort of like the structured goals like we talk about. And I often didn't really achieve those goals because it would be like, I want to get skinnier. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, what does that even mean? So I don't know. Again, this feels like a big change. And I feel like if you're a new listener, you might be like, what the heck? How do you have a whole podcast where you talk about this stuff and you weren't doing it? And it's like, I don't know. I just made it happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I very much feel like I was like speaking things into existence. And it's like, well, if I'm talking about journaling and I'm talking about self care, I'm gonna do it because I'm talking about how it feels good. And it's like I was convincing myself as much as I was
Mhm.
convincing the audience. And yeah, I don't know. It's very strange. The other
Yeah.
thing I think is that I talk about myself kindly on the podcast, obviously, because I think it would be really weird if I came on and then was just like tearing myself apart. But that's how I speak to myself mentally, is not very kindly. But I think
Mhm.
that that shift has made a big impact on my life. Whereas now it's like, I don't know. I believe and I achieve. Like now I journal, I do
Yeah.
yoga, I set my goals, I achieve my goals, and I see big improvements in my life compared to where I was. And I've built sort of confidence in, I don't know, myself, and I'm happy to try new things and experiment. And I'm open to more experiences like therapy, applying for new jobs, that kind of stuff. And I found that my confidence has really grown, especially in work. Whereas before, I was not confident in work at all. And I have been like diagnosed with PTSD related to workplace incidents. And it was just like a very traumatic part of my life, which is sad because it's such a
Mhm.
big part of it. Whereas
Yeah.
now I feel like with the podcast and with the fact that it's like I've done this, like I've got a viral
Mhm.
TikTok, I've got a podcast I've done for
Yeah.
3 years. Like it's like I have to believe in myself because the proof is right in front of me. So I think that that is the biggest change that I see in myself.
I love that so much. And it is deep, but at the same time, it's so simple. And I've been
Yeah.
seeing actually things around on TikTok, speaking of TikTok, but especially around the whole beginning of the year and people being
Mm.
like, what the hell? Like, I just started showing up. I know like the term that girl is a little like outdated at this point. I don't know if people still use that term, but
Yeah.
people showing up being like, what the hell? I implemented a that girl routine and it was actually making me feel better. And like people being
Yeah.
like so pissed off that it was actually effective. And this isn't to
Yeah.
say you need to show up and wake up at like 5 in the morning, go to Pilates, come home, chug your water, then make your matcha. And, this isn't what we're saying. And then shower with your Olaplex.
Mhm.
Like, no. What the simple part of it is, if you take care of yourself, you will feel better. Like that's the
Yeah.
gist of it. No matter what taking care of yourself looks like. And I feel, Tag, while you were talking, that's exactly what you were saying is like once I started
Yeah.
setting goals, all of a sudden I started feeling more accomplished and like I felt like I
Mhm.
was actually doing something and working on something and I had something to be proud of. And it's like
Yeah.
also on the work front, like maybe even talking about things like one of the things I took away from the podcast and why it's been so great for me is because it very much is like a therapeutic thing where when you talk about things and get them off your chest or just put them out to the universe, you just feel so much lighter, but you also kind of think about it a little bit differently once you've like heard it rather than just thought
Mhm.
it. So I don't know. I feel like your experience is exactly what I'm hoping our listeners can say for themselves as well. And maybe not to the same extent, because, like you said, you're showing up every week, like writing notes. So it's like, okay, today we're setting
Mhm.
goals. So it like forces you to. But I just think, and I don't want to be like coming across tooting our own horn at all, but I just feel like if people are actually doing the things that we put in the podcast episodes, like all of the advice, all of the
Mhm.
tips, all of the action items we give you guys almost as homework. I hope you're feeling the same way as Tegan, and I hope you're feeling empowered
Mhm.
to actually live this dream life. It's not just a dream, it can be your reality if you show up and actually do the work.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So, Sadie, how would you say that you've changed from the start of the podcast to now?
Yeah. So it is hard. And you said the exact same thing. Like, I feel like my who I am over the last 2 years, it's been rocky and it's because of the pandemic, which is just so happens to coincide with the time we launched this podcast. So it's like so
Mhm.
hard to say why and what has made me go through the motions the past 2 years. I've said this
Yeah.
before. I think it was at the end of season one, I guess, going into season two, or I guess our season, like 2021 year in review. I was like, 2021 was literally the hardest year of my recent memory, like definitely the hardest year of
Mhm.
my 20s. And it was because I spent so much time alone and a lot of time just, well, I really like I don't know if prided is a word. I really took pride in who I was when I was connected to my pre-pandemic life, like who I was
Yeah.
in the routines I had set and the systems I had built for myself. And, it was very much go to work, go out with friends, be social, dinner and drinks,
Mhm.
come home. Like I was just very focused on that and very proud of those routines and systems I'd built for myself. So
Mhm.
when all that was taken away through the pandemic, I lost sight of myself. I was like, what the heck? Who am I when I'm not in those routines and systems anymore? So I really felt disconnected from myself. And I also suffered really low confidence, and like I feel it was really the first time I had, and I'm still kind of recovering from, or like trying to rebuild the narrative around certain insecurities that I had. Like I had really bad body image, really bad like skin stuff. You guys should hear me show up on this podcast every week, talk about how much my skin sucks. It still sucks. I'm still dealing with it. But this was kind of, in these last 2 years, this is the kind of stuff I've been dealing with internally and like behind the scenes, I guess. So showing up on the podcast has been hard, especially through season 1. I feel I made a lot of strides last year through 2022. But through 2021, it was hard to show up on the podcast and be like, this is how you live your best life, because behind the scenes, I was not living my best life. And I put so much pressure on myself to like, girl, you know what to do. Like, you're showing up on this podcast and you're telling everyone how to live their best life. People are telling you it's working, or, you know, people are having a great experience, yet you can't even turn the ship around for yourself. So it was really tough on me. And I'm not saying the podcast was like a bad thing at all. It was just like probably things that you guys didn't know I was going through behind the scenes. And I think what was so great, though, is we made a lot of connections through guests on the podcast. And like I met Taddy, who gave me a birth chart reading. And I know we just had her on the podcast a few weeks ago at this point, I guess. And she was talking about astrology for 2023. And I mentioned how she did my birth chart reading. And it was just such a great experience, like extremely validating. And I feel like if we didn't have the podcast, I wouldn't have met her and I wouldn't have had that experience of a birth chart reading. And she pulls some tarot cards. Even on her Instagram story, she'll pull tarot cards for people who like DM her. And even when she does that for me, it's extremely accurate. But I feel like that experience was so validating and kind of pointed me back to myself again, if you will. And we also met Sarah. She was a personal trainer who came on the podcast. I think that was season 1. These were like some of our first ever guests on the podcast, actually. But I then hired Sarah, and she was my personal trainer. We did a program in 2021, and then through 2022, I worked with her for the majority of the year. And it was like, again, that's somebody I probably wouldn't have met if it wasn't for the podcast. So I feel like, Tag, you were like showing up on the podcast, setting goals, journaling, like that was really helpful for me and held me accountable. But for me, I really use the podcast as a like way to find actual tools and like resources to get myself back on track when I was feeling really low, or ways to kind of like level up in a way. Because 2021 was my year of leveling up, which kind of backfired on me and had these negative side effects I was just talking about. But then I kind of like figured out how to get myself back on track, or how to level up in a better way with the help of people we met through the podcast. And even outside of those guests that I like personally hired and like paid for some of their services, I think even just chatting with some of our guests has been extremely helpful for me and helped me like process things I was going through in my own life. Like we had Sarah Vermont on the podcast. She was talking all about starting your career, a little bit about like kind of pivoting your career. The biggest takeaway from that episode for me was it's okay to just have a just for now job, like to not love your job every day and, you know, for it to be the end all be all. Like it's okay to just kind of go through the motions and live in the moment and just figure it out. So that came at a perfect time for me. We also had Barry and Barry on the podcast, and I was like a huge fan of her. This is so nerdy, but she talked all about understanding your menstrual cycle. And that's been a big thing in my 20s, is just understanding my body, especially as I get older and, you know, things like that. So just talking with these guests was extremely interesting and like I think really helped me on my personal growth journey. But again, I know that was all deep and dark, but I think especially last year as I embarked on like a mental health journey and really try to turn things around for myself, I'm feeling way better. And I feel like that kind of shows in me showing up in the podcast, and I feel a little bit more genuine and less imposter syndrome with all the episodes we've had coming out lately. Like, I believe in this stuff, I'm practicing this stuff, it's working for me, and I know it'll work for you. But I'm also learning to take that pressure off myself, and I'm learning to set aside my perfectionism and set aside what I think other people expect from me, because that was a big thing, was starting this podcast and coming on. I was like, people expect me to be a goal setter. People expect me to be a journaler, because this is who I am and like what I've been preaching to people. But when I was going through that little bit of identity crisis, it didn't feel super genuine to me, but I felt pressured to still be that person. So I'm learning just to accept myself for who I am in the day. And I think the podcast has really helped me with that. And going back to the whole perfectionism thing too, I feel like I've had so many business ideas and side hustle ideas over the years, and none of them have actually turned into anything. And like, I'm talking even actually back in college, I had a blog that was maybeitsmay.com, because my nickname for my parents is May. And it was just like something I was so excited about, but I did it for 3 months and then it fell off. And then Instagram came around and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to start like a, fashion influencer, not an influencer, that wasn't really a term at the time, but like a fashion Instagram blogger account. And then I would do that for a month, and then I would never post again. Then, there was always something coming up where I was like, oh yeah, I'm really excited to do this. But I really think my perfectionism stood in the way, because I'm someone, even with the podcast, I'm like, do you want to rebrand? Like, let's rebrand, or let's not do this, or let's not reach out to whoever because we're not big enough. And then we reach out to that guest and they're like, yeah, I'd love to be on the podcast, and it happens. So I feel like this has been a great learning experience and all of that. So there's been a lot of upsides, despite me just saying how there was also some downsides that I was struggling with at the same time as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think realistically, like if you look at any 2 or 3 years of your life, it's like it's going to be defined by a lot of ups and downs. Totally. It's just interesting to view it through the lens of this podcast, where obviously we like to keep it positive. We, I don't know. We don't always get to talk about what's really happening in our lives, because it's like, do we want to bring down the vibe of the group to just like complain that our work sucks this week? Like, no, but that's kind of the reality, I think, especially during your 20s.
Totally. And I think too, we were just saying, which might be a good segue into the next half of the episode, but so much can happen in a year. Like, that's the biggest thing I've learned probably from the pandemic. And obviously just the last 2 years in general, I guess. It's like first a pandemic, then something else, then something else. And it's like so much can change in a year. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that we are at least in a better place now, hopefully, than we were. Well, maybe I'll pose it as a question. Do you feel like you're in a better place now than you were in February 2021?
For me, absolutely.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I think the next part of this, like, get to know us life chat kind of episode is we're going to talk about our toxic traits.
I love this. I feel like it's always fun to, like, you guys to get to know us for things that we wouldn't otherwise really get to share. You know what I mean? Like, even last year we did like our hot takes in the get to know us episode. The year before that, like season 1, we did would you rather, and I just feel it's like a little bit more fun. But I also always take the lens of, if my sister's listening, if my mom's listening, I want to try to get something out there that even they wouldn't know about me, but it is a challenge. So we'll see if I get them today.
Okay. Who do you want to start? Should we go back and forth with our toxicness?
Sure. Yes, sounds good. So mine are like kind of silly, but they're very accurate for me, and things that annoy me about myself. Okay. So the
Mm-hmm.
first one is very specific, but I'm also hoping you guys can relate. And it is that I wait for my food to go bad in the fridge before I throw it out. So I won't eat I won't eat the food because I'm like, it'll be bad soon. So I'm not going to eat it. But I won't throw it out either yet. Or I won't throw it out yet either because it's not bad
Yeah.
yet. So I just let it grow mold in the fridge. And once it grows mold, I'm like, okay, now I can throw it out. Like, it's so stupid and annoying. I don't know why I'm like that, but that's probably my number one toxic trait.
I get it. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the first toxic trait that came to my mind, I think is maybe rooted in me being a Gemini, but like
Mm.
I am a shit talker in my core. Like my husband and I, we just will, and it's never like, I don't know, mean or like, it's never for anything other than like for us to entertain ourselves. But
Mm.
we just like love chatting about other people. Like we chat more about other people than like ourselves. And we just like we love going on double dates and then being like, so they said this, what's that mean? What's going like, I don't know. I feel like I just love shit talking. And
That's
like
so
the
funny.
best is when there's like a mutual friend, someone we went to like university with, haven't seen in 5 years, they're like getting divorced. We're like, oh
Oh,
my
yeah.
God, did you see? Like, it's nothing to do with our lives. We don't know this person. Like, but that is the best. And I was at like dinner with all of my coworkers. Our boss took us to dinner and she asked, who's really good at keeping a secret? And everyone was like, I never share secrets. If you ask me it's a secret, I will take it to my grave. And I was like, well, I tell Tyrell everything. And they all looked at me like I was a horrible, horrible person. But I
Oh
was
my
like,
gosh.
I always thought the understanding was like, if you told me something, I will
Yeah.
not tell anyone else, but I will tell Tyrell and we will like
Yeah.
discuss and break this down. So I don't know. That was like a very strange experience for me because I was like, I don't know. And I was like, it's never anything bad. Like maybe if it was like,
Yeah.
I'm dying, don't tell Tyrell, I wouldn't tell him. Or, you know, like I
Yeah.
wouldn't ruin someone's proposal or announce someone's
Yeah.
pregnancy. But
Yeah.
it's like the little stuff that has nothing to do with me. I love that
That
to
is
my
so
core.
funny.
We're just like two little old ladies chatting about like the neighborhood or something. But yeah,
I was
that's like
gonna
my most
say,
toxic trait.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I can tell you grew up in a small town, but maybe even that's not
Yeah.
even true. Like, maybe that's because I feel like there's like, it's not even like gossip. Like, I wouldn't say
Yeah.
you're a gossip, you know?
No,
Like,
because it's never to anyone else, or it's not like I'm not trying to use like facts as currency or
yeah,
anything. It's just like, I
you're
don't know.
just,
I just
yeah,
chat it out.
that's so
I'm a
funny.
chatter.
Remind me to never go on a double date with you guys.
Yeah.
I'll
Well,
be
we
like,
can
actually, no.
debrief you afterwards as well.
Yeah.
You can be like,
You
so
know
what did you
what?
think? Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say, let's just shit talk on the date, you know? Let's just all four of
Yeah.
us just get it out
Yeah.
of our systems.
Exactly.
So
The
funny.
thing is too, like I know it's toxic. Like I'm
Yeah.
why am I talking about these other people? This doesn't even matter. But then at the same time, we're like so entertained. Like if we go on vacation with other people, when we're going to bed, we're like, okay, let's talk about what just happened today and like break that. We need our own podcast where we just
Yeah.
like break down the like nothing happenings in our day to day. We can like change people's names or something. And I don't know. We
That's
entertain
so funny.
ourselves. So that's probably the most important part.
Yeah. Love it. And I like the self-awareness. You're like, I know it's
Yeah.
toxic, but this is who I am. So
Yeah,
so funny.
exactly.
Okay, I think the second one on my list, this one, it's hard to explain, but I think I set myself up well going through how alone time was such a like hard part of the pandemic for me. But my
Mhm.
second toxic trait is thinking I can't have enough alone time because I'm an introvert. So this is a toxic trait because I will go a week without making plans and I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, this is going to be such a great week. I'm just going to be, you know, wake up, do my work, log off work, do yoga, cook dinner, watch YouTube. Like that is my dream day. It's going to
Mhm.
be so relaxing, self-care to the max." But then by the end of that week, when I go like a full week without seeing people, without hardly leaving my house, being a total
Yeah.
hermit, I'm so moody and so sad and so down in the dumps, and it's not good. But then this is the second half of the toxic trait, is then I'll go be like, okay, that was too much alone time. Next week, I'm going to book a whole bunch of things in my week so that doesn't happen again.
Mhm.
But then by the end of the week, after I've had plans every single night the following week, I'm exhausted. And then the cycle
Mhm.
starts all over again because I'm exhausted. I'll do absolutely nothing, make no plans. Then by the end of that week, I'm moody. Like it's just a
Yeah.
literal toxic cycle of no balance between being social and being an introvert. And I'm still trying to figure it out, but
Mhm.
that's my second toxic trait.
Yeah, I find that that's probably relatable. Like, at least I find for me, it's like weekends. I'll have one weekend where I do nothing and I'm like, that was so great. A weekend where
Yeah.
I did nothing, the best. But then if I have too many weekends like that, I'm like, what is wrong with me? I'm not
Yeah.
taking
And
full advantage.
yes. And I'll go
Yeah.
through phases where I'm like, I don't have any friends. Like, I have nobody to
Yeah.
even make plans with. And it's like, that is
Yeah.
so false because as soon as I start making plans or like start reaching out to people, all of a sudden I'm super busy. Like, but when
Yeah.
you go through a lot of it, yeah, you're just like, nobody likes me. I don't have any friends. And who am
Yeah.
I? What's the point? I'm wasting my 20s away. Oh, yeah, it gets
Yeah.
toxic quick.
Exactly. Yeah. I think my next toxic trait is that I am just like crazy hard on myself.
Mm,
And I'm interpreting this as like true toxic energy. But yeah, I'm just really hard on myself and about
yeah.
things that I know don't matter. Say this
Mm,
podcast when I'm
yeah.
editing it. If something's going wrong, I am having a mental breakdown. I am crying. I am freaking out. Tyrell has to come in and like help me. And it's like, is anyone going to care if an episode has ums in it?
Right.
I'm going to guess no. But
Yeah.
do I care? And will I send myself into an anxiety attack about it? Yes, because I'm crazy.
Absolutely.
And so
Oh,
it's just
no.
like little stupid stuff like that. And it's, I don't know. I'm a big overthinker. So I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well,
Yeah.
maybe people won't care, but maybe Sadie will listen. And then she'll be like, well, this episode sounds different. Do I know logically that's not going to happen? Yes. Could I ask Sadie, Sadie, would you care if this episode had ums in it? I know what you're going to say. And yet, that's just not how my brain works.
Oh,
So,
jeez.
yeah,
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
a big toxic energy in my life.
Yeah. I think just the whole concept of overthinking, that's a slippery slope where it's like if you
Yeah.
overthink one thing, then it's easy to overthink everything. And then you just spiral
Yeah.
into anxiety attacks over it all. I get that 100%.
Yeah.
My last one is this one. Okay, I think it's also relatable, but my last toxic trait that came to mind is that I don't often run late, but when I do, it's because I was taking an outfit photo before I left the house.
Mm.
And guys, when I tell you, I'll be like, oh no, it's just gonna be like a quick, I'm already ready. I have the outfit on, I have my hair, my makeup done. Like, those are the days I'm taking the outfit photos. And I'm like, it'll just be a
Mhm.
quick snapshot. I won't be late because of this. Oh no, it takes me literally like 10 solid minutes, 20 different tries to get the right angle, the right, I don't know, how close I am to my mirror because there are always mirror pics
Mm-hmm.
like right in my entryway, right before I'm leaving the house. But if I'm ever late, that is the reason why. It is not because the TTC was down. It's not, because of a legit reason.
Yeah.
It's because I was taking an outfit pic and it never goes as smoothly as I think it will.
Yeah. I love that. I think my last toxic trait is that I am a very lazy person. And I think like I do a lot of things, but I do them because I just think I have to. If I was,
Mm.
didn't have a job, I feel like I would lay in bed for like 12 hours a day. I would watch like 3 movies a day. I would just Uber Eats all my food. Like if I had unlimited money, I don't even think I'd move my body because I am just fueled by lounging around.
Yeah. Well, again, that's okay. Self-awareness, man,
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't do it because I know that that would be bad, but I feel like there's, I don't know, a narrative around like if you just get up and move, like you'll feel better. I'm always like, it might have felt better to just lay in bed. Like they're like waking up early, having the time before your day. I'm like, I don't know, laying in bed and watching TikTok feels pretty good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am a proud, lazy person.
That's funny. I love it. Well, I feel
Yeah.
like I learned a little bit about you. Hopefully, you learned a little bit about me. Hopefully, the
Yes.
listeners learned about both of us. And now people
Yeah.
are going to be thinking all day to themselves, what is my toxic trait? Or maybe you already have them like lined up. I feel the idea,
Yeah.
I don't know. This is just how we think about things now. The last thing we thought could be another good way to get to know us is just sharing some of our life goals with you guys. And I know we talk about goal setting a lot. And I know in the first episode we ever did, we talked about our goals for the podcast. We talked a little bit about that today as well. But I think this is more outside of our monthly goals. What are some dreams we have
Mhm.
for our life on the larger scale? Things we've always envisioned for ourselves that maybe we're slowly working towards, that sort of thing. I think the first one, and probably the biggest one on my list, is that I've always had the dream of owning my own business.
Mm.
And I don't know what that business is. Like, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a fashion designer, then I wanted to be a singer. And I was like, in both cases, the show revolves around me,
Yeah.
I'm going to own the business, I'm going to hire the band, whatever. Maybe that's not how being a singer works, but in my head, that felt like owning my own business. But I've
Yeah.
always just had the dream of being a little entrepreneur. I always I had my websites I'd set up and I was like, I'm going to own like a marketing agency. I've thought about so many different things. And
Mhm.
I don't know, to this day, I still don't know what that business will look like, but it is a goal of mine to own my own business, mainly because I have big boss energy. Like, I don't want to have a boss. I want to be the boss,
Yeah.
which I don't think surprises
Yeah.
anybody here. And I just get very specific about like work stuff and my vision, and it drives me nuts when my ideas get turned down or whatever. So I'm like, it'd
Yeah.
just be so much easier to have my own business, but I don't know what it is. So that's number one. And actually, fun fact on this, because I do feel like I often am sharing my goals and the goals I achieve, especially, but I
Mhm.
set a lot of goals for by the time I'm 25. So this is like when I was in college, early 20s, and being
Right.
like, by the time I'm 25, I want to live on my own. That was one of them. But one of them
Mhm.
was by the time I'm 25, I want to be self employed, like completely self-employed, maybe
Mm.
not my own business like in a big way, but I essentially wanted to like be freelancing, doing my own thing, not a corporate girly anymore. And of course that
Mhm.
coincided with the pandemic, and I'm very happy that didn't work out that way, but that was a goal. So for a while, I felt like a failure for not achieving that goal by the time I was 25. But now I'm like, no, like, even we've talked about this on the podcast before, like, it's never too late to do something, So I'm like,
Yeah.
if I don't own my own business until I'm 40 or maybe even in my 50s, once I have 30 years of
Mhm.
corporate experience and then I launch my own business, like that's totally
Yeah.
fine, you know? This can still be a goal even if I feel like this is going to sound stupid, but even if it feels like I'm late on getting started on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So my first kind of goal that came to mind is in the next 5 years, I would like to own a home. And I'm not sure what that
Yeah.
looks like, if it's a townhouse or if it's an apartment. All I know is that it like must have 3 bedrooms. So that's what I'm working with.
Yeah.
And yeah, my husband's completely aligned with this goal and he like wants it to be sooner than that, but I just don't know with Toronto real estate if that's a reasonable expectation, but that's I think my number one, just to have our own space and to create something and to feel like, I don't know, we have an investment that we are
Mhm.
building together, that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
I love that. This is also kind of on my list. I don't know though if I care to own it just because I don't know. That
Yeah.
feels so out of reach for me, but I also don't want to write it
Yeah.
off. Same for owning my own
Hmm.
business. But on the townhouse piece, that is my next move. Like when I leave this apartment that I've been in for, I forget how long, 6, 7 years now, my next move will be
Hmm.
to a townhouse. That is for sure. If I'm living there by myself, if I'm living there with a like future partner, I don't know yet. I don't know if I own it, if I'm renting, but I will live in a
Hmm.
townhouse. That's the vision and my goal.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, the next thing on my list, which is also kind of like maybe this is going to happen, maybe it's not, I'm not writing it off. Maybe have a baby? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'd like to have a baby, but I feel like we wouldn't want to have a baby unless we could financially give the baby a good life.
Yeah.
And so that is kind of, I think, the key piece. And so maybe that's not going to happen with the state of the world. And so I think we're
Yeah.
fine with that. But I don't know. Maybe in
Yeah.
like
I
5 years
know.
on our golden 30s, I'll be like, remember when I said maybe I'll have a baby and now I've got 5 kids and I live in a giant house? I don't know.
I
Yeah.
hope so, man. I hope that's your future.
Yeah. I
That'd be
that would
great.
surprise me, but
Yeah,
you
maybe
never know.
five babies. You're like, maybe have
Yeah,
a
too far.
baby, and now we're like
Yeah.
5.
5.
Yeah, it is tough, and I feel like we could actually, I feel, have a whole episode on it because
Hmm.
there's, I feel it's just also like different generational thinking around having kids,
Yeah.
but also a lot of anxieties that are like I think what you said about financial anxiety and having kids, like
Hmm.
that's one of the number one reasons why people aren't having kids now, and I just
Yeah.
find that so interesting. So maybe we'll do a deep dive in this in a future episode, but I think what you're feeling is totally relatable.
Yeah, for sure.
Having a baby is not on my list. That's not a life goal of mine. However, I have some like really weird things on mine. I can maybe like go through them pretty quick, but just like learning a few things. So, learning to snowboard. For some reason, I've always wanted to learn how to snowboard. And I'll actually tell you
Mm.
why. I think growing up, I'm pretty sure my backyard neighbor snowboarded, and I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. She might have only snowboarded
Oh,
once, but to me, I was like, she does this all the time, and that's so cool. And then I
right.
learned Avril Lavigne snowboarded, and I was like, damn, like I'm gonna be a singer and I'm gonna snowboard and I'm gonna be the next Avril Lavigne. So that's
Mm.
probably what inspired that thought. But I've always wanted to, and I always have thought of going on like really luxurious like ski trips and going to, really fancy places where I could snowboard. So this has always been a vision for me. And then, sorry, all of my goals have like backstories to them, but I totally forgot about snowboarding. Okay. And then just earlier this year, like before Christmas, I guess actually, so end of 2022, somehow we were talking. I went out with my sister and her friends, and they were talking about snowboarding. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot I wanted to learn this. Like, this is a life goal of mine. I forgot all about it. And just
That's
I think they
funny.
were talking about snowboarding. And they're like, if we invited you, would you come? And I was like, this needs to be back on my radar. Like, I want to go
Mm.
snowboarding. So that's on my list. I also want to learn about coffee and wine. And this is kind of like ambiguous and broad, but that's been a big goal of mine the past, I want to say 2 years. Like taking a course on both of these things, actually knowing what to like look for in wines and be that friend at like a party that like at a dinner party and I just know the wine, I know what wine to serve with what food.
Mm.
Like that's who I envision my future self being, as well as just knowing about the coffee industry a little bit more. I just want to be that snob, you know? So
Love
that's a
it.
life goal of mine, to become that girl.
Love it. I did take one snowboarding lesson once and it went very, very badly. I will
Yeah.
say, as a
Yeah.
warning.
I'm terrified. I've skied before, but this is different and I'm
Yeah.
terrified. But I also think there's got to be a time where I face my fears
Yeah,
to live
just
out my
do it.
dreams, you know?
Yeah. See, I think my problem is that I'm a good skier and it's just like a different thing. And so the whole
Yeah.
time I was just like, if I was on skis right now, I'd be flying down this hill. And so
Yeah.
I only did it once. And then I was like, I'm a skier through and through.
That's funny. I would definitely not consider myself a skier, so I think there's a chance for me to be a snowboarder.
Yes, definitely then. Yeah, the next thing on my list is just to travel more. This is something like every year my husband and I talk about like our yearly goals and he always says like I want to travel more. And so we're, working on that, traveling to different places, but I really want to go to Cuba because I went to Cuba in I think 2013 maybe. And my husband's never been. And I just like romanticize it so much because it was just like such a nice vacation. And it was like I downloaded all these Lana Del Rey songs. That was the first time I listened to her. And so now I'm just like, Cuba's just like this perfect Lana Del Rey paradise in my mind. And I don't know, it's just a very interesting place. I am very passionate about traveling to tropical locations because I need warmth.
Right.
But as much as Cuba's like tropical and realistically we'd stay on a resort, it still has just like very interesting history and architecture. So it's kind of not just like we're chilling in an all inclusive resort kind of vibe. So that
Mhm.
is like the number one place on my list, but in general, just to travel more.
I love that. I have travel on my list as well, and this I want to travel as much as I can in my lifetime, but to try to like frame it as a goal, a while ago, like probably last year, I guess, I was like, how many countries do I think I could realistically hit by the time I turn 30?
Mm.
And I thought 10 is a good number. Like right now, I've been to 7 countries. One of them is a bit of a stretch, like where I didn't I didn't leave the airport, but I stayed in like their airport hotel overnight. So I feel like I still
Mm-hmm.
spent a significant amount of time there, but not as significant, but more significant than just a layover.
Mm.
But so I'm between like 6 and 7 that I've been to. So I'd only need to go to like 3 or 4 more in the next 3 years. So I'm like, that sounds realistic. And
Yeah.
then just up from there. And kind of along the same lines as travel, but not quite, is I've always wanted to do a yoga retreat and
Mm-hmm.
somewhere really exotic and cool, like Costa Rica, or I don't know if I'd go to India, but maybe like
Mm-hmm.
something different and do a full on yoga retreat. And I would love to do this with my mom. So if you're listening, mom, this is a life
Cute.
goal for me, is to do this with you specifically. But those are often very expensive and I think it would be intimidating, but I want to do it. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I always get ads for yoga retreats, and I was like, this
Yeah.
would be such an interesting vacation.
Yeah. My last
Yeah.
yoga studio did I think like 3 a year. Like they did a lot, but it
Yeah.
was always just kind of like north of Toronto or out, I guess more like east of Toronto. And I was
Oh, okay.
a few times I was kind of intrigued. Actually, no, that's a lie. Those were the ones I was seriously considering. They did go to some crazy places as well, now that I'm
Yeah.
remembering. But I don't know. For some reason, I was like, no, I want to do this with people like I don't know and with
Yeah.
my mom. It was just a different vibe from what I had envisioned for myself, but who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, and girl, you're more than welcome to come to Cuba with us, and you can
Yeah.
cross that country off your list
Thank you
if you haven't
so
been there.
much. Yeah, no, I haven't.
Yeah.
I thought you meant for a yoga retreat at first. And I was like, sure, I'll come.
Oh,
Thanks. But no,
yeah.
just to add it to my list, done.
Yeah. I don't
And
know if they
then,
have
yeah, we
yoga in
can.
Cuba, to be
Yeah, I
honest.
don't know.
I don't
I
know.
just want to
They have
know,
like
sit around
dancing.
and shit talk with you and Tyrell. So I'm like, if I can
Oh,
go on
yes.
vacation with you guys, I'm
Yes.
there.
That's what we are like. I don't know. We're like old ladies sitting by the pool. We both love
Yeah.
like frozen cocktails. So it's like, bring us a pina colada and we're going to talk about the people around the pool. That's very much our vibe in Cuba.
So funny.
Yeah. I think like the next sort of general goal is to continue to be healthier. And this is kind of a journey I've been working through in my 20s. So I'm like, okay, as 5 years brings me into my 30s, I want to continue to sort of figure out what I like, keep doing my yoga, maybe get into Pilates. I don't know.
Hmm.
So that's like not really a concrete goal, but just something I kind of envision for myself.
I love that. I feel like that's how I started on my yoga journey was like, I
Yeah.
want to be a yogi. Like that is what I
Yeah.
picture for my future self. And then all of a sudden I just started going to yoga classes and it
Mm-hmm.
became part of my identity, but you just have to have that vision for yourself and then little
Yeah.
by little that's who you become. So I love that. One thing actually I forgot about, it's kind of along the tropical slash exotic travel destinations and adventurous like snowboarding, but I forgot to add it to my list. It's to go zip lining. I've always wanted to go zip
Oh.
lining, and I had a trip to Vancouver planned for 2020 that obviously got canceled because of the pandemic, but
Mm-hmm.
zip lining was on the itinerary for that, and I was so excited, but it didn't happen. So now I want to go zip lining and I want to do it somewhere crazy. Maybe I'll take a like day trip off my yoga retreat and go zip lining. Like that's the vibe I want. I did have the opportunity in Bali to go zip lining, and what my friend was like, you should go, like you should do it, sign up, sign up. But I was extremely dehydrated and like delusional that day. Like so unwell that I didn't think it was a good
Mm.
idea, but that's the kind of vibe I want is to go zip lining
Yeah.
over a jungle somewhere. Like I think that'd be so fun.
Yeah.
But that's on the list. And then my last thing, which is unrelated to anything adventurous and going back to the home piece for a second. This is another thing that just came up like the past year or so, but I really want to finish decorating my apartment, which I don't know if you're ever finished decorating, but there's a few more things I want to do. And then I want to get featured on some sort of home blog, YouTube channel, anything like that. So we're thinking like, if I'm dreaming big, I'm dreaming apartment therapy. I want to be featured.
Mm-hmm.
I just love home design. I watch, again, with my mom, HGTV all the time. Like, this is just what brings me so much joy. You guys know I have my Style at Home magazine that I love so much every month. And I'm just like, that is a life goal of mine, is to get featured, probably not in a print magazine because I doubt, like it's usually like NHL players and their wives, like those are the people getting
Yeah.
featured. But I feel like something like apartment therapy, it's a little more in reach for everyday people like me. So that's a life goal of mine.
Yeah, I feel like that is definitely achievable. Like, I feel like you could achieve
Yeah.
that now,
I
to
don't
be
know.
honest.
Maybe. See, this is going back. Maybe this brings the whole episode, or yeah, whole episode full circle. It's just, I'm such a perfectionist. So I'm like, I won't
Yeah.
even apply or try until everything is perfect and exactly as I imagined it. But
Mm.
that obviously is a limiting belief and stands in the way of me living my best life sometimes. So maybe I could just go for it. Who knows?
Yeah, like I know a girl I used to work with who was featured on Apartment Therapy. I don't know that it was their YouTube channel or if it was like their digital
Yeah.
blog
Was it
or something.
apartment therapy or was it Sweet Digs? Because I remember
I think it was
you sent
Apartment
me.
Therapy, but maybe
Was
not.
it?
Yeah.
Okay. You sent me somebody who was on Refinery 29 Sweet Digs, and I became
Oh,
obsessed with Sweet Digs, and they just launched in
yeah.
Canada a few years ago when you sent me this. So
Maybe that was it. Yeah.
that's my first goal. I feel like that's achievable. Apartment therapy is the kind of stretch goal just because I feel it's like a bigger deal than Sweet Digs,
Yeah.
but they're both on the list. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like
And
you could do it.
maybe thanks, girl. Maybe a print magazine once I lock down a
Marry a
super
hockey
rich
player.
man. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Hockey player, investment
Yeah.
banker. I'm really open to anything as long as he's got money.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel like you can do it. Like people, when my wedding was like featured in like Today's Bride and whatever, people were like, How did you get it? And I was like, well,
Yeah,
they got an
that's
apply
true.
button on their website. Like that people just don't apply. They
Yeah.
count themselves out. So
That's
yeah,
exactly what I'm doing right now. It's a maybe that's
I
another
feel
toxic
like
trait of mine, actually.
you count yourself out before you even enter the race. I don't
Exactly.
know. My last goal is to try and come up with some type of passive income. And
Mm,
yeah, I feel like this is very trendy.
yeah.
And I don't know. That's just like the vibe. Maybe it's something to do with this podcast. Maybe it's something else. Like I
Yeah.
do have investments, which I think are considered passive income, but I'm like, I don't know, something
Yeah.
else. Something that's making me money while I sleep.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like the podcast could be that. Like, Tegan and I are definitely
Yeah.
exploring ways to monetize the podcast in this coming year.
Yes.
So if you hear ads starting to come in here, that's us making Tegan's goals and dreams come true. Okay, guys?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's smart. Awesome. Is that everything?
I think so.
Okay, cool. Well, we hope this episode was fun for you guys. You got to get to know us a little bit more. I think I said this last week, but a new season does not mean anything's really going to change. We're going to be back next week talking about what we always talk about. We'll continue to talk about journaling, goal setting, all the things we were chatting about today. But we just wanted to thank you guys so much for listening in and supporting us over the past 2 years. And we hope you are just as hyped for another year as we are. I think we will post some Instagram stories just asking if you guys have any requests for this upcoming season, any
Mhm.
guests you want to see, any topics you want us to cover. Just what you want to see more of, even if it's maybe you want to see that Tegan and Tyrell segment come on the podcast where they just shit talk
Oh
people.
God.
Maybe you want more solo episodes. Like, I don't know, just ways that we can switch it up and keep things
Mhm.
fresh and exciting. Like, we want to know what you guys want to hear. So feel free to DM us. But like I said, also keep an eye out on Instagram where we will be asking. But that being said, you can find us on all the social channels. We're at our Golden 20s. So that's Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, Facebook. I think that's it. We also have Spotify playlists to, have a little soundtrack to living your best life. And we're also on Patreon, which is the best way to support the podcast for as little as $2 a month. So thank you guys again for listening, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye.